All right, guys, it is the next day. We are back on this Chevy Corvette. Yesterday, we did an in-cylinder test. We put a pressure transducer in the cylinder. We determined that our fuel injectors were firing at the wrong time. So now what we're gonna do is we are going to check our cam and crank correlation waveforms. We're gonna look at the waveforms to see if we have a failing cam sensor or a failing crank sensor, or maybe we might have a stretched timing chain or a shifted reluctor trigger wheel on the camshaft phaser. So what I did off camera, just to speed up the process, I got access to the crank sensor and the cam sensor wiring. I back probed all the wires at the crank sensor electrical connector, and I back probed the signal wire on the cam sensor electrical connector. So I'm gonna take you with me under the vehicle so we can see my connections at the sensors, and then we're gonna get our scope connected to see what data we're gonna have. But before we go under the vehicle, I wanna give a shout out to our cameraman Kyler. Thanks for being here. So now let's go under the vehicle so I can show you my connections. All right, guys, so here is the electrical connector of the cam sensor. So on my red test lead, I am back probing the signal wire of the cam sensor. Okay, so this is the harmonic balancer up here, and this is the electrical connector of the cam sensor. Now let's look at the crank sensor. Now I'm back probing all the wires on the crank sensor because getting to the crank sensor is very difficult. I had to remove the starter to get to the crank sensor. Actually, I wanted to get to the computer electrical connector so I can access the crank sensor signal wire and the cam sensor signal wire at the ECM electrical connector. But finding the ECM was a lot harder, so I just decided to remove the starter so I can access the crank sensor. So I'm back probing all the wires so we can check the 5-volt reference of the sensor, our sensor ground, and our sensor signal when we start the engine. So as you can see right there, we got all our test leads connected to the crank sensor, so that's good. So now I'm gonna reinstall the starter off camera, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can start the engine. We are done back probing the cam sensor and the crank sensor. All these test leads are coming from, 3 of these scope test leads are coming from the crank sensor, and the red test leads is coming from the cam sensor signal wire. Now I have a non-good cam and crank correlation waveform here. So I got this from Mr. Ray. I think his last name is Yurgo, Ray Yurgo. Ray, thank you very much for sharing this non-good waveform for this Chevy Corvette with a 6.2 liter engine with me. Actually, Ray is awesome. He has shared, I think this is the second time or third time that he's bailing me out. I remember I was working on a Mazda a long time ago, and I was looking for a cam and crank correlation. I posted in one of the Facebook groups. I don't remember exactly what Facebook group it was, but I posted in a Facebook group, and within an hour, Ray replied and put a non-good cam and crank correlation waveform of the car that I was working on. And he did the same thing yesterday with this Corvette. So Ray, thank you very much. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna collect the data coming from the cam sensor and the crank sensor, and then we're gonna compare it to this non-good waveform that we have. So I'm gonna get my lab scope set up before we start the engine. Now yesterday we were using the ATS lab scope. We could use the ATS lab scope too, but I'm gonna use the Snap-on lab scope today. So we're gonna go to our lab scope. We're gonna use all 4 channels on the lab scope. So we're gonna be on the 10-volt scale because these sensors receive a 5-volt reference. So let's be on a 10-volt first, and then we can reduce the voltage if we want to. All right, so now I'm going to start the engine. Let me put my waveform here. Let's start the engine and see what we got. So I'm gonna start the engine. All right, so as you can hear, the engine is running. I'm gonna bring up our voltages here. Okay, so the blue trace is our cam sensor 5-volt reference. I'm sorry, crank sensor. So the blue trace is our crank sensor 5-volt reference voltage. And then the green trace is our crank sensor ground. So right now we have 0.05 on the crank sensor ground, so that's good. And then the yellow trace is our crank sensor signal. Oh, that's good. And then our red trace is our cam sensor signal. So what I'm gonna do now is I am going to, let me try to reduce. Okay, let's leave it on the 10 volts. I'm gonna filter all these signals here. Okay, and then we're gonna pause this. We're gonna zoom out. I'm gonna turn off the engine. Okay, so now let's analyze the data. Let's see what we got. Okay, so I'm gonna turn off the green trace and the blue trace. I'm gonna grab my known good. I'm gonna compare my known good to this. So it's pretty bright over here. I can't really see. So let's compare the data in the shop. So cameraman Kyler, if you can follow me here. Okay, I'm gonna have to retake this capture because I need more time on the screen. Okay, I'm trying to get everything lined up to our known good here. This doesn't look right. This doesn't look right. So I'm gonna count these. So we have 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's like one tooth off. Okay. Cameraman Kyler, if you can show this. So basically what I'm doing is, although we're screen recording this, but I want you to focus on this. So what I'm doing is, you see we have this wide over here, this like wide tower. And then there's another wide. And then there's a small one here. There's small. And then small. So here it is on our screen. So small, small, wide, wide, small, small, wide, wide. And then we have this over here, and then this. So this is it right here, and this is right here also. So what I'm doing is I'm counting between this over here, this wide. Can you see the screen also? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. because I know we're screen recording, but it's gonna make more sense if I do it this way. Hopefully the glare is not too bad. So I'm gonna count from this over here. So from the beginning of this, okay, so the falling edge on this first wide over here, this wide window, so this one here. So if I count here to this, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the big one. So if we go here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 8 on the non-good and we have 7 over here. So we are 1 tooth off. And then just to double check, we can count from this one. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 15 teeth. So one over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is pretty small. Let me make it big. Okay. So we're gonna count. So from here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me redo this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So on the 6th tooth. So let's count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, it's slightly off. Slightly by 1 tooth. Now, is that enough to cause this misfire? I believe so. I believe so. Okay, there's one more test I need to do. Let's go back to the vehicle. I want to look at our voltage waveform of the injector. Let's look at the voltage waveform of the injector, and I'm going to use an amp clamp around the injector so we can see how much current the injector is drawing. Because remember yesterday when we looked at the injector voltage waveform, our voltage spike on the injector was shorter, so it wasn't high enough. So what I'm going to do now is let me grab my short test lead, and then we're going to connect it to our lab scope, and then we're going to start the engine and take another capture. Okay, so I'm going to back probe the injector control wire on this injector here. And then, actually, let me pop up this wire. I want to connect my amp clamp to the injector wiring. So right now, at this point, I'm checking and double checking myself before we make the call, because we have to be 1000% sure that this is what we need before we make the call, because fixing this is not going to be cheap. So we have to be very sure. Okay, so I'm going to reconnect the electrical connector of the injector to the injector, just like that. And then our amp clamp, we're gonna clamp it around one injector wire, just like that. I'm gonna turn on our amp clamp. Okay, our amp clamp is on. So you guys will see this on the screen. So let's go back here. Okay, so let's look at the injector first. So our blue trace is going to be our amp clamp. We're going to be on the 20 amp scale. Okay, I just zeroed my amp clamp. So now I'm gonna start the engine. So we're gonna invert the amp clamp pattern. Let's filter this. We're gonna trigger this over here. So our current waveform looks fine. The current waveform looks good. So on the injector peak, we have about 60 volts. So I'm gonna turn off the vehicle. Let's pause this. Okay, let's analyze the data. Because what I'm doing right now is I'm double checking the injector pattern to make sure that our issue is not potentially with the injectors. Although we are off by 1 tooth on our cam and crank correlation. Okay, so it's so bright out here. Let's walk back in the shop. All right, let's see what we got here. Okay, so let's show our cursors. Okay, so right now our on time of the injector is 2.6 milliseconds. So our on time is fine. So the amperage that we are drawing over here is about, so the injector, when the injector turns on, is drawing about 1.2 amps. So that's good. And then the peak voltage on the injector is about 56 volts. 56 volts is not, it's not a lot. Okay, so I mean, let me grab this. My cam and crank correlation piece of paper flew off. All right, so at this point, what's next? I mean, what would you do if you were diagnosing this? What would you go from this point? Because, you know, we saw yesterday our injector is firing at the wrong time, and then when we look at our cam and crank correlation, we compare it to a known good. The one we have on our vehicle is slightly off. It's off by 1 tooth. So is that enough to cause this, or do we have another problem somewhere? So let me know in the comment section. I think that's good enough evidence. Okay, I'm good with what I'm seeing over here on the injectors. Actually, I'm gonna save this. We're done. So now, okay, let's walk back to the vehicle. This injector is spiking up about 56 volt, which is good in my opinion. and then it's drawing about, how much amperage was it drawing? I think it was like 1.2 it was. You know, I'm okay with that. I'm gonna look at my cam and crank correlation one more time, and then we're gonna make the call. Because at this point, I don't see what else that would cause this. What else could it be? What else could it be? Okay, now I am just going to look at my our red trace and yellow trace. Okay, cam sensor signal and crank sensor signal. That's all I want to view. Let's do this one more time. Okay, I just increased the voltage scale, so the amplitude of the signal is going to be a lot lower now. All right, perfect. All right, I'm going to analyze this one last time, and then we can make the call. All right, it's too bright here. Let's walk back in the shop. All right, one last time we're going to analyze this. So we got, so right here, we have narrow, narrow, wide, wide, and then it's going to repeat narrow, narrow, wide, wide. So we got narrow, narrow, wide, wide. And then from here to here is one revolution of the crankshaft, and then from here to here is another revolution of the crankshaft. So 2 revolutions of the crankshaft, 1 revolution of the camshaft. So I'm gonna count from this one over here, from here to here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Actually, I don't even know why I'm doing it this way. Let me bring out my cursors. I don't know how cameraman Kyler is going to do this in the edit, but I'm sure Kyler will make us look a lot better. Will make this look a lot better. So right here. So we have about, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Over here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is not looking good. This is not looking good. Not looking good. Okay, let's move this from here to here. Okay, so now I'm going from below this first wide. Okay, below this first wide. So we're going, well, once again, guys, I mean, I know I'm being repetitive, but we're about to make a call. So I'm just checking, double checking, even triple checking myself, because I have to make sure that we are right before we call the customer and deliver the news to the customer. Because at this point, we're going to have to take the timing cover off and see what's not working here, or what went wrong. So this is going to be a labor-intense job, so I have to make sure we're accurate. So we're going to count from this over here. This is where the rising edge on this first wide window is. So 1 over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 16. So here, how many do we have? So we have 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so we are off by one tooth. Okay, so at this point, we're done with our diagnosis. We don't have a sensor problem. Our sensors are putting out a good signal. We don't have any dropouts or glitches. Our sensors are fine. So the cam sensor is, the cam signal is slightly off, is actually slightly off to the right from the crank sensor signal. So it's off one tooth. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to call the customer. I'm gonna let the customer about what we know. Now I'm gonna recommend tear down. I mean, we have to remove the timing cover so we can look at the trigger wheel on the cam sensor. I mean, we have to remove the timing cover so we can look at the trigger wheel on the cam shaft sprocket or camshaft phaser. We gotta see if it's timed or if it moved slightly. If it did, we have to correct that. And after that, this vehicle is gonna be fixed. So at this point, next step would be removing the timing cover. I'm gonna talk to the customer. I don't think we should include the customer's conversation on this one. I'm gonna do that off camera because I'm getting tired. It's lunchtime. I gotta go get some food. And I'm sure cameraman Kyler wants to go get some food too. So we're gonna end this over here. Be on the lookout for part 4. I think this is gonna be part 3. So this is gonna be a long one. Be on the lookout for part 4. I will talk to the customer when I get back from lunch. Whatever the customer decides, I will bring you guys up to date and then we'll go from there. So thanks for being here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for watching the video. If I was going back and forth and kind of wasting time, I apologize. Cameraman Kyler, thanks for being here. Thank you for your awesome work. See you guys next time. All right, guys, I'm gonna give you an update on the Chevy Corvette that we were working on. Actually, the customer took the vehicle yesterday, and I'm gonna tell you what we decided and the things that are recommended. After we looked at the cam and crank correlation waveform, the cam sensor was slightly off by one tooth. So that wasn't a lot. And I was still, although when we did the in-cylinder test, the injector was firing at the wrong time, I thought maybe the timing was off. Maybe we had a cam or crank sensor that was failing. None of the sensors were bad. And even the timing was not off. It was just off slightly by one tooth. Now, when your timing is really off by a lot, it's gonna cause problem. But if it's just one tooth, I mean, you can kind of get away with that because the tolerance is plus or minus 10%. I think it's plus or minus 10 degrees. So I called my friend Jeff at ATS. We actually even diagnosed it together. Unfortunately, none of our camera people were here. So cameraman Kyler and cameraman Matt were not here. So we could not show that on camera. I had Jeff kind of help me double check the timing because I really wanted to see what was happening. We used the ATS scope. We looked at the cam and crank. We looked at the in-cylinder together. And everything seemed fine. Everything was good. Now, since we had high negative fuel trim numbers, so the injector were being turned off, were being turned on for a shorter amount of time. So the computer was trying to take away fuel from the cylinders. Based on the fuel trim numbers we had, the other test I did was I also did a fuel injection balance test where you turn on the injectors and then you watch your pressure gauge connected to the fuel rail to see how much fuel each injector is spraying, and the pressure drop on all the injectors was the same. So at that point, we confirmed that our timing wasn't the issue. Our cam and crank sensors were fine. You know, I didn't feel comfortable telling the customer that we should tear down the front of the engine to redo the timing. That's not where the issue was. I recommended to the customer that we change the injectors. I said, since we have high negative numbers, I believe these injectors are either not right, or since they got them online, let's get OEM injectors on this Corvette and let's get an OEM mass airflow sensor and install them and see what happens. And then the customer told me, well, if that's the case, I was thinking about tuning the engine. I want to tune the engine, and when you tune the engine, they have to tweak the software on the ECM, and they also have to replace the injectors. He said, well, if I'm going to tune it, then I don't even need to change the injectors. I'm just going to take it to the tuner so they can tune it for me. So that's how we ended working on that Chevy Corvette. So the customer said, I'm going to tune it, then don't worry about it. So he came here, he picked up the vehicle, he paid our diagnosis fee, and he drove it back to New York. So I wanted to give you guys an update so you can know how fixing that Corvette ended. I really wanted to fix it, but the customer, didn't want to go ahead because he's tuning it. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you for watching the videos. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Cameraman Kyler, thanks for being here. See you guys next time.